Black Myth: Wukong was easily the biggest video game release of not only August, but the entire year, and perhaps longer than that, annihilating the record for the most concurrent players on a single player title on Steam, and even pushing the platform to its highest active user count of all time. With a respectable Metacritic average of 81 and an overwhelmingly positive Steam rating of 95%, it's almost certainly a contender, if not the frontrunner for Game of the Year. And after playing it for myself, I can't help but agree. Seconds into the game, you're thrown into an incredible cutscene before taking control and going up against an equally impressive boss encounter. Believe it or not, this is essentially the tutorial, and it's probably an appropriate one given the game's sometimes unrelenting difficulty.
It might not call itself a Souls-like, but the challenge is definitely similar to that of From Software's titles. Other inspirations include God of War, which you can see through its cutscenes and boss design, and let me tell you, there are a lot of bosses, each with unique movesets and impressive animations that will keep you on your toes from start to finish. But not only does Black Myth: Wukong excel in its gameplay, but also with its visuals. This game has always been something of a showpiece for Nvidia's hardware. From frame generation to path tracing, the GPU will be put to the test here, but that's because it's such a consistently stunning experience of detailed character models and dense environments.
Some complaints have arisen about optimization and accessibility, but if you are a fan of these types of games and their associated difficulty, it's definitely worth a try.
Star Wars Outlaws is finally here, and the overwhelming response seems to be that it's just as good as any other Ubisoft game, meaning perfectly decent, with a score of 77 on Metacritic, praise centered around its immersive locations and unique syndicate reputation system. But the game has also received criticism for its allegedly derivative story and uninteresting combat, as well as a few too many bugs. But overall, both critics and players tend to be enjoying the overall package, which marks yet another win for the Star Wars franchise when it comes to video games.
Into the Pit is the latest entry in the ever-popular Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, but this time, instead of being a realistic depiction of the average office job, this title is a 2D pixel art side-scroller. Now that doesn't mean that it loses to jump scares, I found that out pretty quickly, but it is a very different experience compared to the other games in the series, meaning that if you aren't a fan of the regular formula, you might want to give this one a try, especially if you're a horror fan. I tried it out on the Steam Deck while flying back from the US, and I really enjoyed the hour or so that I spent with it, and it seems that quality is consistent throughout, as it's currently sitting at 96% overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam.
Thank goodness You're Here is a hilariously unique adventure comedy game where you explore the northern English town of Barnsworth and help out its assortment of weird and sometimes disturbing characters. Don't let the art style deceive you, this is not one for the family, with vulgar but incredibly funny jokes around every corner. At a price tag of just $20 and overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, you really can't go wrong with this one.
Level 0 Extraction is yet another entry in the incredibly overpopulated genre of extraction shooters, but in my very inexperienced opinion, it's a good one. To be clear, my time with this title has been one of repeated failure, usually right after being scared by a noise and running into a group of enemy mercenaries, but that's beside the point. The atmosphere in the beautifully detailed environments of this game is truly terrifying, and the gameplay is just as tense, with your group of 3 players and a few others trapped in a research facility with a deadly alien. As is standard with the genre, the stakes are created by what you enter and exit with, so the game can really have you on the edge of your seat. I have heard some complaints about balancing, which are the main reason for the game's not quite positive score on Steam, but hopefully these can be ironed out in the near future, because I really think it has potential.
August was a very big month for Borderlands, for better and for worse. The bad news is that the movie based on the game franchise is pretty abysmal, with it currently sitting at just 10% positive on Rotten Tomatoes. The good news, at least hopefully, is that Borderlands 4 is on the way. Not much is known about it yet, but even with this brief cinematic announcement, it's already one of the most anticipated upcoming video game releases.
Published by Konami, CYGNI All Guns Blazing is a fast-paced shoot-'em-up with gorgeous, explosive action. Even as someone who hasn't played many titles in the genre, I instantly saw the appeal, with incredible visuals and sound design to match the game's overwhelming combat. It's definitely a challenge, but one I'd be willing to stick with given just how much fun I had trying it out. If you're a fan of similar titles, I'm sure this game's beautiful battles and brilliant bosses will win you over.
In a month of critically acclaimed titles, there's always one that ruins the clean green score screen, and August is no exception, with Dustborn being the yellow blot on an otherwise successful month. With a Metacritic score of 68 and plenty of viral clips of its heavy-handed messaging, it's understandable why this title only reached an all-time peak of 83 players on Steam.
For a few months, Valve's MOBA hero shooter Deadlock has basically been an open secret. With no formal embargo on information or gameplay, it became clear that an announcement was imminent. And this month, we got exactly that in the form of a rather bare-bones Steam page featuring some art from the game and very little else. However, anything from Valve is always exciting, so I'm eagerly awaiting more information on their first new game in nearly 5 years.
Concord has often been compared to Valve's unreleased hero shooter, as this released hero shooter is averaging about 1% of the concurrent player base that the invite-only Deadlock is receiving, and that's being generous. Complaints are often targeted at its somewhat premium price tag, despite commonplace microtransactions and an uninteresting roster of heroes. We actually played some of it in the open beta and did enjoy our time, but found little that separated it from others in the genre, and it seems like this sentiment has resonated with players, leaving Concord to fade into obscurity just a few weeks into its lifespan.
So what do we have to look forward to next month? Well, despite August setting a pretty high standard, September might just come out on top, with it shaping up to be a very eventful month in terms of video game releases. The choice-based story game set in the world of Dead by Daylight, the casting of Frank Stone, releases on the 3rd from the developers behind Until Dawn, and on the very same day, Harry Potter Quidditch Champions launches. Then on the 6th, Astrobot makes its full-length flat-screen debut. Then a few days later on the 9th, the co-op Warhammer title Space Marine 2 releases. Then later in the month, we have Funko Fusion on the 13th, The Plucky Squire on the 17th, Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster on the 18th, Frostpunk 2 on the 20th, Zookosis on the 23rd, Disney Epic Mickey Rebrushed on the 24th, and finally, to wrap up what looks to be an enormous month, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom releases on the 26th. So please make sure to let us know which title you're most excited for in the comments down below, and consider subscribing to keep up to date on all of these titles and more. Thank you for watching, see you next month.